Yeah, welcome. I can see Osawi. Osawi, welcome to the meeting. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay, good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to our weekly cloud security virtual training. Today, we're having an interesting topic whereby we are going to be talking about plan and implement security for Azure SQL database and manage instance. Without talking too much, Azure SQL database and managed instance are very important. And if we're able to secure these services, it will be a very good one and to prevent a lot of hazards from happening. We have on the mic, Stephen Osonuga is the one that is going to be the speaker of the section, and me, Emmanuel Itoje is actually on another section and he won't be available today. So I'm standing in for him to anchor the section. So once again, I welcome everyone to Nigerian, the Microsoft Nigeria Security User Group. So those of us that are on the call, you can just do us a favor by sharing on the group chat that we are live so that other people can join. I can see we have Goswill joining, we have Timothy, we have Chisom. If we can just share, some of us we can post on our WhatsApp status to invite some of our friends so they can join the section so they can join the section. So without wasting much time, I would like to introduce our speaker. So we'll just get to know a few things about our speaker. So our speaker for today, who is going to take us in the section, is the person of Stephen Osonuga. So Stephen Osonuga is known as cyber preacher. He's a preacher of cyber security. So he's a cyber security analyst, a cloud engineer with a strong background in vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, including extensive practical knowledge in Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Service, keen to using his skills to ensure that cyberspace remains safe and secured. And that's who we have today. So I'm going to be handing the microphone now to Steve. Steve, you have the floor. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here, and it's a privilege to be able to speak once again in the Microsoft Nigeria Security User Group. And I'm looking forward to sharing knowledge about securing your Azure storage database, so your Azure database rather. So without much further ado, let me just share my slide so that we can all get to see the presentation for today. 1 second. Okay. So please, if you can see my slide, let me just indicate.
Not yet. It's still coming up.
Okay. Is the slide up now?
Not yet. Still coming up.
Is it up? Let me know. Let me know. Let me know.
No, it's not up now. Your screen is not up.
It's not up. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm coming. Let me just quickly refresh my browser. So that's okay. So let me try again. And oh no.
Yeah, not yet. Except maybe any other person see Steve's screen? So it shouldn't be as if I'm just speaking from my end here. Also, please, can you help us
Okay, that's
confirm
true.
if you can see his screen?
There is no sign that is even attempting to share, because if you are sharing, we should see a blank screen or maybe like a pop-up.
Yeah.
There's no
That's true.
attempt.
Or Steve, can you share your slide with me so that I can just
All right, so let me just
maybe
I
share the
will do
screen
that
on your
just now.
behalf?
Um, all right, just let me check your WhatsApp DM. I've shared it.
Requested for access. Please grant me access.
Okay, check the new link that I sent to you.
Oh, okay.
Or just refresh. That is very strange. So you just bear with me. My slide is kind of dynamic, so it runs on animation. You might have to like double press next to show the next information. But yeah, you can just help me to present the slide while I talk about. So we'll be looking at the Azure SQL database and SQL managed instance. And it is actually a very interesting topic because we'll get to understand what the Azure SQL database is, and not just understand it, but also know how to secure the database. Then we also get to know the difference between the Azure SQL database and the Azure managed instance or the SQL managed instance. All right, so guys, can you see the screen? If you can see, just send a reaction. Let me know that you're seeing the screen. Drop a reaction. All right, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So once again, my name is Steven, and we'll be touching the topic plan and implement security for Azure SQL database and managed instance. Now, please move on to the next slide. Our agenda for today, what we'll be discussing or looking at is the first, we want to understand the Azure SQL database and also the SQL managed instance security. Then we'll look at the Microsoft Entra database authentication and also get to understand how to enable and monitor database audits. We'll look at data classification authentication of sensitive information, look at Microsoft Purview, then plan and implement dynamic mask, then also look at the transparent data encryption. We'll look at the always encrypted function, and also lastly, we'll then look at the Azure SQL database firewall. Next slide. So the Azure SQL database and SQL database managed instance. Now, when we're looking at securing the database, then we're actually talking about using the multi-layer approach to securing our database. Now, I'm sure that we've all heard of what we call the defense in depth. Please, if you have any question at any time, you can just feel free to use the comment section and we'll attend to that. Thank you. So I'm sure that we've all heard of the defense in depth. I think that is part of the fundamentals of security when it comes to cloud. You know, I think the AC900, we talked about the defense in depth, how that there's a multi-layer approach to security when it comes to protecting data. Now, similar to that, our SQL or the managed instance also has a defense in depth approach to securing our SQL database. And so as we can see, we have the network security, which is at the extreme perimeter. Then we have the access management, we have the threat protection, we have the information protection, then before you can now come to access the customer data. Now, before someone can say that they want to have access to the SQL database on the cloud, they have to first go through all these security checks before they can be eligible to have access to the database. Now, when it comes to network security, Microsoft Azure SQL database and the SQL managed instance provide a relational database service for cloud and enterprise application to help protect customer data. Firewall prevents network access to the server until access is explicitly granted based on IP address or Azure Virtual Network traffic origin. Now, what that is saying is that by default, there's a firewall prevention already based on the network security that prevents users from having access to the database unless there is a detailed explicit IP whitelisting. User can have access to the database, and that's at the perimeter level. So, and to have access to the database, one, the IP firewall rule has to be configured, and two, the virtual network firewall rules have to be configured as well. Then at the second layer, we have the access management. Now, the access management, what it does is that it allows managing database and servers within the Azure. It controls the authentication and the authorization. So I'm sure we both understand or all understand authentication. Authentication is the process of proving that the user is who they claim to be. And so when it comes to access management, first, a user has to be authenticated before they can have access to the database. And secondly, they have to be authorized. Authorized or authorization is it refers to controlling access on resources and commands within a database. So that means that when a user is authenticated, if they don't have the necessary control to have access or the necessary access, they cannot view the database or they cannot modify the database. So in as much as authentication is required, there's also the part of authorization where that's where we look at role-based access control or access control in general. So if your account does not have access to view database or to modify the content or to view it, then you won't be granted access. So the first layer is network security. Second layer is access management. Now, okay, before we move to the third layer, which is threat protection, when it comes to access management, there are two forms of authentication that could be used. First is the SQL authentication, and second is the Microsoft Entra authentication. So the SQL authentication is where we make use of the SQL server identity, that is username and password. So we could either authenticate through the SQL or through the Microsoft Entra ID. So, and we know that Microsoft Entra ID is the suite that allows us to log into the identity and access management platform for the Microsoft Cloud. Now, the third layer is the threat protection. On the threat protection, SQL database and SQL managed instance, they secure customer data by providing auditing and threat detection capability. Now, even inside of the SQL database and the managed instance, there's still a level of protection that comes with auditing the data and also some advanced threat detection capabilities within the SQL database. Then the fourth layer is the information protection. So now this information protection has to do with encryption or protecting our data when it comes to when it's in transit and also when it is at rest. So we know that when data is in transit, it is going through the internet, it is passing through the HTTP protocol, and so when the data is going in transit, it needs to be encrypted. And so when it comes to information protection, which is the fourth layer, there is a transport layer security that is in play to protect any data that is moving in transit. Then, but when the data is at rest, there is a form of encryption, which is called the transparent data encryption, which we are going to discuss in later slide of TDE. Then we also have the always encrypted that allows us to secure our database when we are viewing our database. So that is always encrypted. So this is the multi-layer approach to securing our SQL database. So on the left, we can see that we implement firewall, IP, and virtual network rule for robust network security. And it supports SQL, Microsoft Entra authentication, and Windows authentication for secure access management. And then lastly, we make use of encryption for data in transit or at rest and offer advanced threat protection. So that is like the summary of this whole layer protection. So can we move to the next slide? Now, the first thing that we need to look at is the Microsoft Entra ID, because we cannot have like access to the SQL database, or when it comes to the SQL server, we need a Microsoft Entra ID account. So when it comes to Microsoft Entra ID authentication, we need to make sure that we are authenticated as user. So we use Microsoft Entra ID for authentication with SQL Server database, the managed instance, and the Synapse analytics. So you ensure that proper setup with a Microsoft Entra tenant, the admin configuration, and the permission as well. And then also make sure that we enable secure connection using the Microsoft Entra authentication, the multi-factor authentication, and the client integration. So before you can use the Microsoft Entra authentication with your Azure SQL resource, you need some few prerequisites, which number one, you need a Microsoft Entra tenant that is populated with users and group. And then we also need an existing Azure SQL resource, such as the Azure SQL database or the Azure SQL managed instance. So in the coming lab, I'm going to show you how to deploy the Azure SQL database and also show how to also secure it as well. So the prerequisite that you need now is that you need the Microsoft tenant, the Entra ID tenant with users and group, and then you need to have SQL resource such as the Azure SQL database or Azure SQL managed instance. Please, can we move to the next slide? Now, talk about Microsoft Purview. Now, Microsoft Purview solution, can you tap on next? Just once so that we can get the, okay, beautiful.
Okay, I'm using Adobe Reader.
Okay, so thank you. So Microsoft Purview solution, in the governance, it is in the governance portal, and it provides a unified data governance services that helps you to manage your on-premise, your multi-cloud, and your software as a service data. The Microsoft Public Portal or Governance Portal allows you to first create an holistic, up-to-date map of your data landscape with automated data discovery, sensitive data classification, and end-to-end data lineage. It also helps to enable data curators and security administrators to manage and keep your data estate secure. Then it also empowers data consumer to find valuable, trustworthy data. Now, some prerequisites to have access to the Microsoft Public Governance is that you need an active Microsoft Public account that is already created in the Azure portal, and then you need a user that has permission to have access to the Microsoft Public Governance portal. And some permission that you can use is the compliance administrator. So even if you have a global admin account, right, before you can be able to start using the Microsoft Purview Governance Portal, you need to give your global admin with the compliance administrator privilege or role so that you can now start exploring the Purview environment and the governance portal. Now, we can see from the screen that it helps us to protect our on-premise cloud and SaaS environment, and also offers policy around the Azure Synapse, the SQL Server, Power BI, Azure SQL, Microsoft 365, right? So then the governance, Microsoft Public Governance Portal comes with the data catalog, the data sharing, the data estate insert, and then the data policy. So I will just summarize the data catalog app. So with the Microsoft Purview data catalog, business and technical user can quickly and easily find relevant data using a search experience with filter based on lenses such as glossary terms, classification, sensitive label, and more. Then the data sharing app or the data sharing, it enables organization to securely share data both within your organization or cross-organization with business partners and customer. And you can share or receive data with just a few clicks, right? Then we have the data policy as well. It is a set of central cloud-based experience that help you manage access to data sources and data sets securely and at scale. So that is some of the features of the Microsoft Purview Governance Portal. Now, can we move to the next? Now, so can I go back? Okay, sorry. Now we are on Microsoft Public Governance, register your data source. Now, when it comes to secure database, we want to make sure that we add our data source to the governance portal, right? So that when we add our SQL database, we can be able to classify our data in the SQL database and also to protect sensitive information using encryption such as, what is the name again? Such as transparent data encryption. Yeah, so we can also use always encrypted to protect our data using the governance portal. And so now we want to make sure that we want to add our data source or to register our data source so that data from the SQL database can be populated into the Purview portal. Okay, so in the Microsoft Purview, after you register your data source, you can then scan your source to capture technical metadata, to extract schema, and also to apply classification to your data. And you need to be a data source admin actually, or one of the other Purview roles, such as the database reader or the data share contributor, to register a source and manage it in the Purview governance portal. So during registration, you choose from system classification or you use custom ones for scanning. Then this process enables organized data management and classification in Purview. Can we move to the next, which is to scan and ingest your data. So after you've added your source that, okay, the coming from the Azure SQL. Now we want to scan the database itself and ingest data. So in Microsoft Purview, scanning and ingesting link your account to data sources, and these populate the data map and catalog, simplifying data exploration and management. Scanning connects to data source. It gathers technical metadata and schema and apply classification and sensitive label. Ingestion populates the data map and integrate data source and lineage information, allowing for lineage tracking. Then lineage information is added to existing source or creates new one during lineage injection. So after data source are registered in your Purview account, the next step that is to scan it. The scanning process establishes a connection to the data source and captures technical metadata names like the file size, the column, and so on. It also extracts schema for structured data source and applies classification on schemas and applies sensitive label if your Microsoft Purview data map is connected. So sensitive label is, to just briefly explain it, we know that database generally is used to store sensitive information like a customer record, like your name, your credit card, phone number, and the rest. So we want to make sure that the database itself has a sensitive label or sensitivity label, such as confidential, so that when the data is traveling across Purview, there is a more advanced protection that is placed upon the data in transit because of the sensitivity label that is placed upon it. So that is just to understand what the sensitive label is in the Microsoft Purview. So after we've scanned and done and we've ingested our data, we'll then move on to the next, which is to create a scan rule. Now, please can I move to create a scan rule set? Next slide. Beautiful, beautiful. So in Microsoft Purview Catalog, you can create scan rules to enable you to quickly scan data sources in your organization. Now, a scan rule set is a container for grouping a set of scan rules together so that you can easily associate them with the scanner. Again, a scan set is a container for grouping a set of scan rules together so that you can easily associate them with a scan. Now, you create a scan rule set for easy association with scan. Then we have the default set that it can be created for various data source type and it can be used company-wide. And users with permission can craft custom rule sets for specific business requirements. Now we have the system rules and then we have custom rules. So based on what you want to create, you can either choose some predefined rules or you can create your custom rules to narrow it for your business requirements. So after we've now created our scan rule, we'll then move on to the next, which is called data classification. Please can you move to the next slide? All right, thank you. Now, data classification in the Microsoft Purview Governance Portal is a way of categorizing data assets by assigning unique logical tags or classes to the data assets. Now, we know that database contains names, contains phone number, contains credit card, contains date of birth, for example. Now, we need to also classify the data inside of this database so that we can identify which data is being accessed. Now, Microsoft Purview data classification relies on business context, enabling assets categorization like passport number, driver license number, credit card number, SWIFT code, and similar data types. So we can classify them. If when it comes to credit card, we classify them as as a credit card field and so on like that. So classification aids in understanding, searching, and governing data, accessing associated risks, and also implementing protective measure. Purview automated classification offers 200 plus system classification with options for customizing and editing in the governance portal. Now, some uses of this classification is that is a way of organizing data into logical categories that makes the data easy to retrieve, to sort, and to identify for future use. And this can actually be important for data governance. Among other reasons, classifying your data is important because it helps to narrow down the search for data assets that you're interested in. It also helps you to organize and understand the variety of data classes that are important to your organization and where they are stored. And it also helps you to understand the risk that is also involved or associated with your data. So we have two types of data classification. We have the system classification, which comes with purview, and then we have the custom classification as well. So can we move to the next slide, which is labeling in the Microsoft Purview data map. Now, we talked about classification. Now let's talk about labeling. Classification is when we're classifying organized data, right, or assets. Now, labeling. For labeling, it is not just, sorry, it is not where the products live. The label identifies with the product. Now, to get the work done, people in your organization collaborate with others, both inside and outside. And data doesn't always stay in your cloud, and it often roams everywhere across your device, across your application, across your services as well. When your data roams, you still want it to be secure in a way that meets your organization, business, and compliance policy. Now, applying sensitive labels to your content enables you to keep your data secure by stating how sensitive certain data is in your organization, and it also abstracts the data itself, so you use labels to track the type of data without exposing sensitive data on another platform. So let's take, for example, you're applying a sensitive label, which is highly confidential, to a document that contains social security numbers and credit card numbers. It helps you to identify the sensitivity of the document without knowing the actual data in the document. So wherever that document is going to fly, it carries the label of highly confidential. And so once they see the label, they know that, okay, this is the sensitive data, and they don't have to, and the purview itself does not have to read the data, like read within the lines. So sensitivity label allows you to label based on their sensitivity. So some benefits of sensitivity label is that it labels data as it travels along the communication line, and then there is also when you're making use of the Microsoft Purview, it comes with an auto labeling feature where labels can be applied automatically based on the sensitivity of data. So when an asset is scanned for sensitive data, auto labeling rules are used to decide which sensitivity label to apply, and you can create auto labeling rules for each sensitivity label, defining which classification or sensitive information type constitutes a label. So this is how labeling works for the Microsoft Purview. So essentially, you want to ensure that your data that is traveling across the company within or outside is secure. Now, can we go to the next, which one? We're now coming back to our SQL database security now. So we have to look at the Entra ID authentication. That is a multi-layer way of protecting our database. Then we also have to look at Purview, which comes with governance and classification of data to help us to classify our data. Now, let's come back to the Azure SQL database. So the Azure SQL database, or the Azure SQL managed instance, supports dynamic data masking. And dynamic data masking limits sensitivity data exposure by masking it to non-privileged user. Now, when a help desk is trying to access the database, if he or she is authorized to have access to it, they will have access to the database. But now, whether they can have access to the full data in database is now where dynamic masking comes in. So when it comes to credit card information, the first three is a column. The first three column is maxed out so that even the help desk cannot view the sensitive data or the sensitive information. All what they can just see is the last 4 digits. So from that, you as a security or a cloud security engineer now, you are able to enforce more security for customer data. Okay. Now, dynamic data masking help prevent unauthorized access to sensitive data by enabling customer to design how much of the sensitive data to review with minimal effects on the application layer. And it is a policy-based security feature that hides the sensitive data in the results set of a query over designated database field. Now, for example, let's say a service representative at a call center, they want to identify a caller by confirming several characters of their email, but the complete email shouldn't be reviewed to the service representative. A masking rule can be defined that marks all the email address in the result set of any query. And so that protects the customer data and also still allows authorization to the data for the service representative. Now, we also have what we call the dynamic data masking policy. So that means that the initial one is the static one where we manually do that. So SQL users are excluded from masking. So a set of SQL users or Microsoft Entra ID identities that get unmasked data in the SQL query results. So users with administrator privilege are always excluded from masking. That's what it means, and they are allowed to view the original data without any marks. So that is the dynamic data masking policy. And then we also have the masking rule, which is a set of rules that define the designated field to be masked and the masked function that is used. So moving on, so the first security aside from network security and firewall, make use of the dynamic data masking to protect customer data in the database. Now we have the transparent data encryption. Transparent data encryption help protect Azure SQL database. Also protect the Azure SQL managed instance and the Synapse SQL in Azure Synapse Analytics against the threat of malicious offline activity by encrypting data at rest. It performs real-time encryption and decryption of the data, associated backups, and also transaction log file at rest without requiring changes to the application. So by default, transparent data encryption (TDE) is enabled for all users. For all newly deployed SQL database and needs to be manually enabled for older database of SQL database or the SQL managed instance or the Synapse Azure. So TDE encrypts the storage of an entire database by using a symmetric key called the database encryption key, DEK. Okay, so it supports the Azure SQL managed instance and the Synapse Analytics. Now, on the right, we can see that we can enable the transparent data encryption by either making use of the service managed key or the customer managed key. Now, if a customer wants to manage their encryption key such that they don't want even Microsoft to be like the cloud to be able to decrypt the data, the content without the key, then customer can also create their own customer managed key. And so whenever they want to view the database, they'll always put in their customer key. But when it comes to service managed key, it is sort of automatic because it is with Microsoft. All right, so moving on to the next. We have the labeling in Microsoft Purview Data Map. Now, this is where we talk about always encrypted. So always encrypted is a feature that is designed to protect sensitive data, such as credit card numbers or national identification numbers. And it is stored in the that is stored in the Azure SQL database, the Azure managed instance, and then the SQL server database as well. So always encrypted allows clients to encrypt sensitive data inside client application and never reveal the encryption key to the database engine. Now, this provides a separation between those who own the data and those who can view it. This is a very important part that I should learn about the always encrypted. It allows clients to encrypt sensitive data inside of the client application and never reveals the encryption key to the database engine. And so that sort of provides encryption in use, because when a database engine is making use of the data, I want to make sure that the data is always secure and protected. So the always encrypted encrypts data and does not reveal the key to the engine. And so that's what allows it to achieve encryption in use. And also, it's also used for encryption in transit and also at rest. That is why it is called the always encrypted. Now, this provides a separation between those who own the data and can view it and those who manage the data but should have no access to it. Always encrypted can be configured to support limited confidential query on encrypted database and the query that involve equality comparison. So can we move to the next? Now, when do we use the always encrypted? Now we can so on the diagram we can see that there is column master key encrypt data where we use it on the column level, and then on the right we have the master key, like the column master key. So it can be used on the master key configuration, and then also it can be used on the column level. Okay, so can we move to the next? Please, can we move to the next? All right. And so lastly, we have the Azure SQL database firewall. Now, the Azure SQL database and Synapse Analytics blocks public endpoint access by default with firewall, and it uses server level or database level IP firewall rules to manage database access securely. And firewall rule can be configured via the Azure portal, the PowerShell, the CLI, or the Transact SQL. Okay, so let me just briefly explain the database level IP and the server level IP. The database level IP firewall rule enable clients to access certain database, and you can create the rule for each database, and they are stored in the individual database. So that is database level firewall. It is per database. Then for the server level IP firewall, this rule enable clients to access your entire server, that is all the database managed by the server, and the rules are stored in the master database. So the maximum number of server level IP firewall rule is limited to 256 for a server. That's the maximum number of the firewall rule. And if you have the allow Azure services and the resource to access this server setting enabled, this counts as a single firewall rule for the server. So that is the two different database level is the firewall rule per database, and the server level is per server. So the rule applied to every database in the server. All right. Now, before we go into the lab, can I move to the next? The answer will show, but it's fine. So these are some questions that would help us to juggle our brain. on what we've learned so far. So why is why is database auditing enabled in the Azure SQL database? It is to track database activities and to detect security violation, right? That is why auditing is enabled, so that you can send the logs of the database to the Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and then you can track the activity and also detect when there's a security violation. We're going to look at that in the lab. Then, when is Azure SQL database always encrypt recommended? It is used for scenarios that requiring encryption of sensitive data in use, at rest, and in transit. That's why it is called always encrypted. Then, what is a use case for the Microsoft Purview governance portal? It's used to classify and manage sensitive information across data sources. So, as always, if you have questions, feel free to drop it in the comment section and we'll attend to that. Is there any questions so far? Any questions so far? Checking the chat. Someone asks, please, can all this be done in the free tier? Enter ID. No, you need a subscription actually. You need a subscription to deploy a Azure SQL server. You need to have a credit subscription in your Microsoft portal. Okay, before you can start making use of all this. All right, so let me just share my screen so that we can move to the lab scenario, and we'll look at deploying a Azure SQL database and also how to secure it in our environment. Okay. I don't think it is. Please, Mr. Emmanuel, can you do you have access to the Azure portal? My is still not sharing.
I have a thing. Okay. No problem. So let me just
my screen. All right.
Let me log in. I'll share my screen.
All right. So please, if you have questions so far, just feel free to drop your question in the comments related to Azure SQL database, managed instance. Okay, yes. So before we continue, managed instance or the Azure SQL managed instance is where we deploy our database in a virtual machine, right? So that means that we need to have access. So that means that we have access to the instance and then deploy our database, so we can have as much database. So we are the one that is managing the database environment because we're making use of a virtual machine, while the Azure SQL database, or rather the Azure SQL server, is where Microsoft provide us with access to the database, and they're the one that will manage the whole environment for us, so we don't have to do much configuration. So that means that some security feature would by default come because they are the one that are managing the database environment. But the managed instance is where we, as the customer, we deploy our database in a virtual machine, and then we begin to enforce the connection to the portal, and also begin to enforce our security on our SQL database. So that is the difference between the two. One is Microsoft managed, and the other is customer managed. Okay. Then what else? Okay, let's see. I'm still trying to see if I can share my screen though.
Okay. So I'm trying to share mine, but I want to
Okay.
log into Azure portal first.
All
So I
right, no
share.
problem. All right. Okay. Please on a new tab, can you open any tab and search for is a 500 GitHub? GitHub. Because I want us to make use of a deployment template to be able to quickly deploy our SQL firewall and everything. So just check for the GitHub repository. Yeah, that is it. Up. It's up. Up. You see GitHub. Up. Yeah, that is it. So instead of us to manually deploy the SQL, the firewall, there's already a built-in configuration to run a batch deploy using a template. And that's what we're going to make use of for our SQL deployment. So we're going to make use of the Azure SQL, the Azure SQL Server, which is the Microsoft managed. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, all file, all lab. Just go back. All file. Yeah. Sorry, just hold on a minute also. Network is not so great. And the Azure portal has a way of requiring large amount of bandwidth. Honestly. Mm. All right, so click on number 5, sorry, number 11 rather. 11. and download the Azure deploy.json. Yeah, click on it, then you should see download. Yes. So this is the template that we use to deploy our Microsoft SQL server. Yeah. When we get access to the portal. So you can close this and go back to the portal. Wow.
Let me try another browser. I'll be easy
All right.
related to the browser.
That's true.
Let me try.
This is a Microsoft background. Is it just for your account, or is it not universal?
It's universal. It's because I'm using
Not,
it's universal.
I'm not set on my own account. So
But
I think the
it's
premium
for sure
version.
now. I'm not using what they call me password. That's why I don't want to use password to sign in. So I'm using password.
Okay, that's true.
So once I
Oh, that's
put my
true.
username, it send the prompt.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
are we using
I think
custom
actually this,
deployment?
yes.
Okay. So let's just wait for the Azure portal to load.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. So guys, apologies for the network glitches we're having. So today is just, I don't know, maybe because of the rain that fell in the morning. I don't know.
Nice.
So this one is still rolling. Let me check this browser. Let me see. Okay.
Okay.
Let me try again. I'm using 5G internet. So that's like the best here.
That is really serious, honestly.
Okay. Seems this one is getting better. So anyone that logs in first, we'll just use it.
No problem. Oh, mine is actually ready, but I don't know the screen
Okay, it's
share
ready.
is.
Share your
Yeah,
screen. Let's see. But what is the screen share? No,
it
no.
is telling
Okay.
me
Can you join? Can you join from Teams on the web?
okay, let me do that.
Join from Teams on the web.
Let me do just that. I'm coming.
Our MVP is here. Welcome, sir.
Um, I'll join with a different browser and see if sharing is
Yeah,
possible with it.
yeah. Okay. I think this one is up now. So custom deployment.
Yeah, so search for custom deployment. Yeah, deploy a custom template.
Okay, so I've clicked on it.
Yeah.
So we'll be building our own template. Then I'll
Yeah,
now
build.
load the. Okay.
Okay, then save. Okay, wait, before you save, go back previous or edit template. Now, while I was test running it, I encountered an issue which was in the location, which is ECS. I don't think deployment for SQL Server on ECS is not working. So change the ECS, type ECS to capital EAST, East space US space 2. Is my network good? Okay.
Okay. So which region did you
Okay.
use in your own lab?
Okay, so I'll type it in the comments. So change
Okay.
the deployment location to East US 2.
Okay. Let me see.
I've typed it.
Okay. Okay. I'll be expecting it on the chat.
Yeah, it is there now.
Okay. So East US 2. Okay.
Yes,
Let me
please.
just say this.
Yes, it's this. Exactly.
Okay.
Then
So which other?
the next one below, the next location below also should be changed to ACS 2. All right. Now we can save and move to the next. Now we need to create a new resource group under our subscription. We can name it any name. Okay. Okay, beautiful. Then we'll change the region to STUS2. Then we can now review and create. So what this does is that it is going to deploy our Microsoft SQL Server database, our Microsoft SQL Server, and then also deploy the firewall rule that is going to be used to secure our SQL Server as well. So then it will also create a database for the SQL Server. So this is just an automated way of deploying resources in the Microsoft tenant. So instead of you the manual process of searching for SQL Server, you can create this. You can just make use of the JSON template to deploy the resource that you want to deploy. So yeah. So we're going to wait for it to deploy. It might take up to between 2 to 5 minutes to finish deploying because of the amount of things that we're deploying together. So just be patient and wait for it to deploy and finish. So always make sure to always keep track of what is deploying, because if any of your resource fails to deploy, it shows an error in this deployment detail that the resource in this template failed, and because that one failed now, you might have to redeploy and reconfigure the template from the start. So always take note of the deployment details when you're using a batch deployment. So we'll just give you some time, and it should deploy within 2 minutes. Please, if you scroll down, which one is it creating next? Is this here on the first one? We're deploying 3 resources. Oh, so the remaining two should not be, so shouldn't take time much. But this SQL server is what normally takes time. All right, beautiful. So it's almost done deploying. So any moment from now, our resource should be done.
I think the deployment is complete.
Okay, so it's complete. Sorry, can your laptop carry the next phase, or would you like to switch?
Okay, yeah, let's just continue. I will join with the other laptop then. I'll just switch screen.
Okay. Okay, no problem. So now we can see that we have our SQL server deployed in the user group. Okay, so now we're going to open or click the SQL server and see how can we now begin to secure our SQL server. So I'm going to walk you guys through the different way of securing or of implementing security rather, because the more the security, sometimes the better. Okay, as long as it does not interfere with normal business operation. Okay. So we're going to click on the SQL server. Now, in the SQL server, we're going to click on security on that security tab. Then, so the first thing that we need to do is to click on the Microsoft Defender for Cloud and enable the Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Okay. So enabling the Microsoft Defender for Cloud allows the data to be ingested to Defender for Cloud. Okay, I think it is already enabled.
Maybe from the
Okay, so
deployment script.
yeah,
Okay.
it's already enabled. Probably on your tenants, it's already enabled for the for SQL Server. So the next thing that we need to now do when it comes to securing is that we're going to click on data classification on the left. So go back to your database, your SQL database, because now you're in the Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Okay. So now we'll click on settings first. Sorry, settings. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I've clicked on settings. Under settings, Microsoft Control ID or hello?
I'm coming. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Should I click on Microsoft Control ID under settings or SQL?
Okay. Sorry, hold on. Click
Or
on
maybe I should stop. Okay.
okay.
Are you seeing my screen real time?
Yeah, I'm seeing it real time now.
Oh,
Scroll
okay.
down first. Can you scroll
Oh,
down? Let me
okay.
see.
Oh, okay.
Scroll down more.
Oh, okay. This is the
Okay. Okay. So you can go back to the settings tab and click on the database.
okay SQL database.
Yes, SQL database. So what we want to do now is to enable data classification to classify our SQL database. Now we're going to click on this AZ500 lab database. So this is the name that came with the deployment template. That is why that name is there. So that database, we are going to click on the AZ500 lab database.
Okay.
Now, this is a database level settings. Now, the other setting that we were before is the SQL server level, as the SQL level settings. So now inside the database, we're going to scroll down, click on data discovery. Data discovery. On the left, rather, click on security. On the left, click on security. Let's see data discovery. So click on it. Click on data discovery. Now, click on classification on the right. Now, so we have some columns already inbuilt with the templates, but if we look down, we can see that there are 15 columns with classification recommendation. So Microsoft is trying to tell us that they are recommending some classification for us to use for our columns. So we are going to click on that 15 column with classification recommendation. So we'll click to view.
Okay.
The down one, the 15 column, yeah. So to click on that 15 column too.
Okay.
Okay,
You can
so
actually,
we can see that currently database is using SQL information protection policy. So click on that information bar up there. That's currently database is using up. Yes, no down, yeah. So if we do that, we're going to use the recommendation that Microsoft. Yes, so click on it.
I'm clicking on it. Maybe it's just taking time to respond. Or let me, okay, these are the, just taking
So
time to
you, yeah.
respond.
So if we look down, that is the table, or sorry, the columns in our database. So what we want to do now is we want to use the recommended classification for each of this column to classify the database content. If we want to use confidential or when it comes to credit card table, and there are different classifications. So we want to apply the classification for the database. I don't know. It's not clicking on your end.
Yeah. The recommendation, see, currently we don't have any classified columns. For the recommendation tab, it's not giving me, see,
Okay.
show dismissed recommendations. Let me see.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so select all first.
Okay.
On the left. On the left,
Okay.
select all.
Okay, select all.
Yeah. Select all again.
Okay.
Then accept selected recommendation.
Okay.
All right, beautiful. So it has classified our data, and we can see that on the right we have sensitivity label confidential for data. All right, so this is how to perform data discovery and classification in the SQL database. Now, next, what we want to do next now is that we want to enable auditing for our SQL server. And now what auditing does is that whatever, will I say, event that happens on database, it is logged and then sent to the audit table or also to the Defender for Cloud. So now what I'm going to do now is that we're going to go back to the SQL server. So currently we're in the SQL database, but we want to go back to the SQL server. Yeah. Click on OK. Then under security, we'll click on auditing. Now, we want to perform a server level auditing now. So under the auditing, we can see enable Azure SQL auditing. Now you can see it tells that Azure SQL auditing tracks database events and write them to an audit log in your storage account. So, and also to your log analytics workspace or event hub. Now, what it does is that what it means is that we will need to create a storage account where it sends all the log to. So we're going to enable the Azure SQL auditing. Then we're going to select storage. So we just want to send it to the storage. We'll click on our subscription. Then we're going to create a new storage account or you guys existing storage if you don't mind.
Let me use this
Yeah.
existing storage.
All right, no problem. So, but if you don't have a storage, you can always create new and just input the name and save, then to show on this storage account list. So, now we're going to click on advanced properties. Now we can see retention days. This is where we configure how long we want our data to remain. So we're going to just drag it to 5 or 12 days actually. Drag a little bit. Very sensitive. Just use the smallest value that you can.
Let me just type it here.
All right.
Because dragging it is like okay.
So notice that we are not going to enable the log analytics for now, but if you want to use the Sentinel to analyze the audit log, then we can enable the log analytics. But for now, we're not going to enable that. We're just going to save our configuration like this. So up there, we're going to click on save, and then we have enabled the auditing. Now let's test if the auditing is going to be in play now. So let's go back to our database. If you scroll back up on the left, you will see settings. Then
this one is still saving.
Okay, still saving. Let's wait for this to save. Okay, it's done. So
yeah,
you scroll up, you see settings. Then click on SQL database.
Okay.
Then we're going to select our SQL database. Yes, that's. Now, in the SQL database, we'll scroll down to settings. We're going to drop down settings now. Sorry, security rather. Security, sorry. Then we'll click on auditing. Now, it tells us that server level auditing is enabled. Now, because it is enabled, we don't need to go further and enable database level auditing. Like I said, it affects all the database, anything that we do on server level, right? So now that it is enabled, let's see if the database will audit for any event. So on the top there, you can see view audit log. Click on the view audit log now, up on the top after the discard. Yeah. So it tells us that there's no results. So now let's go back to let's go back to our database. Yeah. Now scroll up on the left. Scroll up. Then click on Query Editor. Now, this is where we can authenticate into our SQL Server database. So just put in any password, any password there. And then click OK. So obviously this is going to fail. So, but now I want to see if the event goes logged. Now let's go back to auditing under security. Click OK. Now we're going to view audit logs once more. Okay, so we can see a database authentication field on the audits. So that is one of the security features that we can use to monitor and you know and secure our database. So now we'll be able to see how to audit our SQL database. So that is it for the practical. We also have other level. Now under the security on the left, we can see networking, right? So that's where we enable some of our networking feature to filter incoming connection and to also select the group of people or the virtual network that can be allowed to connect to the database. So, and by default, it denies, right? But we can then go further to configure virtual. So if we have a virtual network already in play, we can just click on the add a virtual network rule there, and then we can put in our virtual network. So if we don't have, we should have created a virtual network already beforehand and put in that. So, but so generally that is just how we secure our SQL server, and obviously there are still more. There are still a lot of security that can be put in place. We have the transparent data encryption. We have the identity and the rest. So, well, I just want you guys to learn this one. So thank you guys for joining for the lab section.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Steve, for your wealth of knowledge and all. At least I've picked a lot of things, enabling auditing in SQL Server and how to configure network in the SQL Server, and also other security features you talked about in the slide, like transparent data encryption and even information protection. And also, when you even talked about enabling Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which like only that one alone said is a high level of security for SQL Server. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate the knowledge you have shared with us, and we believe that more is going to come, and we are going to see more of you in the community. So thank you very much. Okay, does anybody have any question for us? For Steve, maybe you just want to ask, you can go ahead. You can drop your question. Anybody with any question?
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Feel free to ask any question that is bothering you, and we'll attend to it.
Yeah, you can drop your question in the community. We have a lot of guys there that are professionals, and we can answer your question to guide you on anything you want to learn regarding cloud security, Microsoft Azure, and all. So thank you everyone for joining. Seems nobody wants to ask question. The topic is well understood. Like Steve has really done a very good job. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Steven. I can see some
Thank you so
comment
much.
section. Wow, thank you very much. The recording will be posted for sure. If not today,
Thank
tomorrow, by God's grace, we'll post the recording. Thank you everyone for joining. Mr. Sylvester, Chisom, Solomon, Benga, Jeff, Elijah, and our MVP, and also Greg, Annie, and all Abdul Kadri. So thank you very much. We'll see you next time again on
thank
this
you,
section that we
Ali,
have.
Chisom,
Yeah.
Elijah, Annie,
Sorry.
Benga, Jeff, Mr. Solomon. I will see you, and thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining
Solomon
us all this.
Solomon is a regular face.
He's a
And Benga,
regular,
even
honestly.
Sylvester attended last week. Sylvester, at least I know of Sylvester, is my guy.
Yeah,
Is
Chisom
my guy.
David. Yes, even Elijah also.
Yeah.
Benga. Nice to see them. Thank you guys for
Yeah,
joining.
Benga is a regular guy. Okay,
Yeah, he
please
is actually.
let's keep joining. Let's keep joining because at least you will learn something. You will learn something from communities like this. Since I
Honestly.
started joining community, my life changed.